Hi, Tavish here with Duffy again for our raw material. This is Food Week. So the last time we had you here, we were talking about the spiritual weeks, and this time we are here for the mental weeks. So the first one of those will be food. It's, of course, about actually what we eat and what we put in our bodies and those kinds of things, obvious, but it's really what goes into our mental structure. So I thought we would start by talking about, with our family, some of the traditions that have to do with food.
Well, obviously, I like food a lot. It's pretty easy to tell, and we've always have food for our family dinners and our gatherings and meetings and everything. But there's also, like we said earlier, food for thought, and so we try and provide a lot of that also.
Yes. The biggest one that comes to mind for me would be the 4th of July. Because in my life, that was the biggest family gathering that I recall. And it was friends and family from everywhere. And our family has always adopted friends in. But Grandma and Grandpa's house. And we were always there. That's what we did.
Yep. And then we took it on and had it at our house. And then it got crazy and pretty much out of hand. I mean, we ended up over 100 people, I think, that last one, and that was more than we could handle.
Yeah. Well, they're all different. Every year has been different.
True.
But we have had a family Carduff tradition of a 4th of July party in one form or another. When I was a kid, the menu was staple. Barbecued chicken, Grandpa with his pooches tray, chicken all over it, and then Shasta Cola for the kids.
Yep.
And we didn't get a lot of other soda, so that was always a big deal to be at Grandma and Grandpa's and get Shasta. And to this day, if anyone could bring me a black cherry Shasta, I would be so happy.
Shasta was the good stuff. That's when he had a little bit more money.
Oh, you just reminded me, I don't know why, and I don't know what this has to do with here, but food and mental structure. Here's where it rooted for me. Do you remember you used to sell chicken hats?
Well, yeah.
And you guys, you and Chauncey and Beckett, brother and sister, dad, would go into the grocery store with these chicken hats. It's like, they had a cone in them. They were like a knit hat with a cone that made your chicken.
It stuck straight up in the air with a top knot on top of it and a smiling chicken face. And you wouldn't go with us.
I wouldn't go in. And I can remember one time we're sitting outside the store in the car watching for you guys to come, and it was freezing cold outside, and the car was obviously not on because you guys were inside, and me counting the people coming in and out and how many bags of groceries they had just so that I could, kill the time because I did not want to be seen with you people in your chicken hats. And I laugh at that now, but man, it was a big deal for me. I was so embarrassed.
Yep, you were.
Why?
I'm not sure why.
So that's what Food Week is about, is like going back and trying to untangle those things and understand. I'm still at a loss on some of my own, just hard and fast rules when I was young. Because I think if something embarrassed me, I just immediately, any possibility of it was out or something like that.
Well, when you were in junior high, all any of you girls cared about was being exactly like all the other ones. You had to wear the same clothes, you had to talk the same, everything had to be the same, or you were outcast in your mind.
I remember having that discussion with you. I remember you telling me specifically that was inaccurate, and I couldn't stress to you how important it was. But I've gone back to that conversation many times, known where I was and how I felt, and I know I have a lot of triggers around it still, but also knowing that it was really good information that I was just unable to take in at the time.
Well, I remember you wanted a pair of Jordache jeans in the worst possible way. I mean,
Thank you for not getting me those.
That's all you wanted. And I showed you a picture of some that I had found called Lardache, and you were horrified. I thought that was pretty funny.
Well, here's one I can...
And that was some food for thought.
It is food for thought. Jordache jeans. Let's go back to that. Because that didn't come from my school or my neighborhood or anything like that. That came from girls at the skating rink.
Oh, really?
That I thought were really cool for a while. So I spent a short amount of time hanging out at the skating rink with somebody you worked with when you owned the record store. Someone around the corner's kid.
Yeah, that's pretty neat.
Which also I can tie back to that place. It was, you owned Budget Tapes and Records at 103rd and Metcalf.
Right.
And there was a little, so the whole thing was a pavilion, and they had Pier 1, which was an actual import store at the time. So the only time you could see ramen noodles or a cup of noodles, something like that, it was first imported to Pier 1. And it was in these boxes in there. And so that's the first time I remember having that. But also, there was a party, a Polynesian party of some kind, and I tasted fresh coconut and fresh pineapple for the first time outside your record store. And those moments are still so big to me because I'd never tasted anything like that fresh.
We didn't get much fresh pineapple or coconut back in those days.
None.
Have pineapple all the time now.
Right, but do you remember, when I was a kid specifically, the fruit in the store was...
You really didn't find it there. Not those.
You would find apples, oranges, bananas, grapes.
Yep, that's about it.
Maybe pears when they were in season. And
lemons and limes.
Yeah, in season. But we weren't exposed to the produce. I mean, we were doing really well to eat the frozen vegetables that we ate every single night. Every single night.
Yep.
But that was dinner. That was part of dinner.
Well, there wasn't near the produce available then that there is now.
No. There's a wide variety available now, and we've taken all cultures into...
Yeah, I keep seeing new stuff whenever I go to the grocery store that I've never seen before.
Isn't it fun to try it?
But it's been, apparently around for centuries, and I've never heard of it, so...
Do you remember the hen house that we used to go to that smelled like fish?
And on Warnell. We were just talking about that the other day.
We used to push our face in them.
Well, you like to smell them up close.
I was a big complainer in the grocery store. I can see that now. And I'm not a complainer in the grocery store now, but I am picky, and I am, those things have carried over with me. So let's take a look at food from that perspective of just nourishment. We can look at a family dynamic, because at that point it was you and the three of us. But as far as nurturing goes, we got a lot of reasons, rules, a lot of practical information, a lot of useful information. But emotions, as we talked about during Spiritual Week, weren't, we didn't really know how to deal with them or do much with them, so we didn't. And I think we were all athletes, and we did a lot of running around, and it was easy to get through some of that by just, being outside all the time.
Well, emotions and drama were never high on my list, and so I didn't tolerate them well. And so we didn't have a lot of that.
Well, we didn't have it out loud. But what happens then is it kind of sticks in the body. Mm-hmm. And then when you get older, you have to go back into those places and find, oh, that's what this attaches to. I had, when I broke my kneecap a couple of years ago, all of 1980 was in that. And that's the year that I turned 12. You and Mom got married. She moved here. We moved to a new house. Sixth grade, top of the school.
A lot of change.
And, Ronald Reagan was shot. John Lennon was shot. There were political things that happened that made an impact on me probably for the first time ever. And so that mental structure that changed for me in 1980, and I would say a lot of it changed for the better, but with a lack of emotional expression or dealing, I just kind of glossed over it, moved on, and it wasn't until I was 50 or 52 that I started, my body said, okay, let's slow down and actually look at this stuff. So when I look back on where I was nurtured well, under nurtured, over nurtured, I can see how my mental structure came together. Like if you look at your parents and how they raised you and the stuff that they did, you can see the roots of your own parenting.
Yep.
You can see the choices that stick in your head. These are good ideas. These are not good ideas. And just how we move through being able to change our mind and still feel solid about the things that we believe.
Well, I always felt it was much better to try and build you up and make you feel good about yourselves rather than tear you down and make you feel bad about yourselves. I mean, feeling good about yourself is a much better place to be.
It's true. But you had a daughter that even if you tried to do that would still take it in a completely different way. That would be me. Your other daughter seemed to do pretty well with the stuff you said to her. But I think my inner voice was always a little bit negative towards myself, so I read that in interactions with other people. I can go back now and not feel the intentions that I felt then, but somehow I transfer that to my own daughter. You know, she feels the same way I think that I did. So intention has very little to do with how a person really winds up being or feeling or being structured. That comes from the things that you learn and the things that you believe combined with where you see yourself in the world. How you explain who you are to you. Your inner definition.
Well, positivity, I think, is still one of the best things you can do. I mean, a positive attitude will carry you far.
Well, one thing I can notice from being a kid, and I was always one of the older kids in the neighborhood, or at least this was at the time that I was one of the older kids, I had a lot of power. And that went to my head really quickly. So I think the adults around me had to do a lot of making sure that I didn't over abuse that.
Which you tried to do all the time.
I did. I really did.
No, you constantly pushed the limits, and so
had
to keep showing you where they were. I think you were just trying to reach for the highest rung you could reach for.
Boss of everything.
And you didn't like people telling you what to do, which none of us do.
No, it's true. None of us do. I feel like because of that, I worked with a level of overconfidence. So the outward projection was always so much bigger, better, stronger than whatever the inner self was, but I didn't ever slow down enough to hear that. And I know that one thing that you taught me early on was, and it was in my being concerned about what other people thought, and you telling me that people are so concerned with what they've got going on that they don't actually think about what you've got going on. And it made me start looking at that and noticing where people do that. They don't do it all the time, but they do. And especially on something that makes them uncomfortable, they'll just back out of the whole conversation. So I find those lessons very interesting.
Well, it's surprising how many people still to this day think that they are the center of the universe. They have a very difficult time putting themselves in your shoes or anyone else's.
Some people absolutely can't.
Right. I don't know the difference in how they were raised or how they got there or what caused that, but it's certainly the case.
And that is what Food Week asks us to look at, the why of those things.
Well, I'm taken to the Bob Dylan song. Just one time, I wished you could stand inside my shoes, and for just that moment, I could be you.
Yes, I wish that for just
then
one
you'd
time.
know what a drag it is to see you.
Yeah, I do like that line.
I like that song a lot. But anyway, that's kind of the way people can be.
Well, I realize that a lot of my mental nurturing comes from songs. And a lot of, positive thoughts and lines that I've picked up to absorb into like my philosophy or how I want to be, a lot of those come from song lyrics.
Well, I mean, your theme song was always you can't always get what you want.
It's true. And we do get what we need.
If you try sometimes, you might get what you need.
And that effort comes from dropping the ego and looking at, what soul needs are being met.
Mm-hmm.
Because the ego, which is, I think, what I was just completely enveloped in as a child, I think we all are. But to the degree that I didn't even see my connection to anything outside of me.
Yours controlled you very much.
And that is one thing
but there's nothing wrong. I don't think there's anything wrong with having a good ego and a self-positive
absolutely
nature.
It's necessary.
It is.
It protects us.
It is to get along in the world without feeling like it's crushing you.
Yeah. Yes. And it's germane to happy, healthy lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
But recognizing that we are soulful beings underneath that, I think, is where we get the real magic space, where we can see ourselves as a part of everything and see ourselves as a separate being. And we only see ourselves as separate, then the ego is fully in control. And I know that, my family particularly came from that mindset that we really are all connected, that we are all equal, that we treat people, no matter who they are, with some level of, well, in our case, it was
right.
disrespect to everybody. But I mean that in a nice way. Like, nobody gets special treatment. And I think that was underneath everything that I knew. Like, it was a solid thing on my plate. But I really was pie in the sky about just ego expression. If I could have had every single thing in the magazine, I would have done it.
That wasn't going to happen.
No, the universe was not going to give me anything like that. And good,
Mm-hmm.
because finally at 54 years old, I don't want everything anymore.
Don't need it.
And I've looked at, what my needs really are. And I think Food Week also comes down to being able to identify need. And basic needs in particular, if you have not had basic needs met at some point in your life, that creates a mental structure that is different from those of us who have never experienced that. And that turns into a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, some fight or flight, some, leaving the body and unable to cope. When you are lacking food, water, shelter, that really comes into play. There's nowhere else to go.
What's interesting, we have been going and looking at and visiting senior living facilities,
Mm-hmm.
and looking at what needs may be in the future, and assessing these, and how long we can stay in our house where we are that we love, and that's been quite an eye opener and huge food for thought. And so we're trying to figure out how to unclutter ourselves and our lives and get rid of stuff. And there's so much stuff we've accumulated over all the years. So we have to take what really pleases us. And
You're starting to
and much
make those
much of,
assessments?
many of these things bring me joy.
Yeah, I'm looking around. There's a story to everything here. Pretty neat.
Well, the one we're going to have a battle over is my Marlin.
Nobody needs that.
But I do. Of all the things in this room, that one probably brings me the most joy and brings Marie the least amount of joy.
So you guys are going to be shifting. You have been mentally nurtured by this space for the past
36 years.
36 years.
Well, I remember the three of you, when it was just us, I had a dish that I made called Hamburger Surprise.
Yeah, I talked about this today.
That was hamburger with whatever else we could find in the fridge to throw in with it. And you never were very happy with Hamburger Surprise.
Hamburger Surprise usually, at that point, might have food that wasn't even good.
Once it's cooked, it's fine.
No, this is why. Here is the roots of my Food Week. I will not eat food that is 1 to 2 days before the actual date.
But see, those dates are the sell-by date, not the eat by date.
I seriously had this conversation with a guy today who was telling me he preps all his food on Sunday and eats it all week. And I brought up hamburger surprise, and this is the reason why I can't do this. So that conversation was 2 days before I came here.
That's funny.
That's how.
Well,
this
hamburger
works.
surprise was never a hit at our house, but we had to make it a lot.
Maybe we could turn hamburger surprise into something good.
Well, sometimes it is better than other times.
Maybe in the holidays this year, you and I can make some hamburger surprise.
Some days it was better than others. There's no doubt
Invite everyone
about it.
over for dinner. Tell them we're having hamburger surprise.
There you go.
And just videotape the face.
That would be really funny. I'd like to see that.
See, there's a lot of fun to be had with what we can do with food. There's a lot of stress and struggle and pain around food, but there's also looking at all of the ways that things come together and nourish us that we don't even realize. You know, we're out here talking about the larger picture of nourishment. And at the same time, we really want to hold space for everybody to get to eat.
That's our job is to help people with what they need.
As human beings?
As human beings, it should be.
I do really appreciate that is an attitude that you bring, and that is something that has been present in my life, because I don't think that most people grow up with their family saying, you know, part of what you're here to do is help people. And
why not? I don't understand why it would not be, but
well,
I don't,
people
sometimes I just don't get it.
That's okay. It's okay to not get it, because next week is Ignorance Week, which we'll talk about next week, but it's really about what we don't know. And there's so much more than that we don't know than we do. But
that's because we're ignorant.
When we become curious, ignorance is an opportunity for education. But we tend to fall short of education and look to things like blame and shame, and those things keep our mental structure from feeling nourished. We'll be back in a few weeks with values and ideals, and Quan and I will be back next week with ignorance. Thanks, Dad.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.
See you later.
See you next week.